Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hidden Hockey Podcast. Again, my name is Matt Gordon. Look forward to talking about this stream. I've had the stream scheduled for like 6 months and kept pushing it back until today. So we're going to go into a few different things tonight. This is going to be a little bit more freewheeling than what I've done, a little less structured than what I've done in the last few live streams. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about the best emerging prospects coming up over the next few years, guys you're going to see and hear a lot more about in the next 12 to 18 months. Even some of them you're hearing about right now, just because of how incredible they are as hockey players and how unbelievable they are going into their potentials and hopefully hitting the National Hockey League sooner rather than later. I'm going to delve into probably a few different years. If you guys have any questions during the chat at all, or if you're watching a recording and want to ask me questions about some certain prospects that you have your eye on, feel free to leave it over on the side or leave it as a comment at the end of the video. I will get to them as soon as I can and really appreciate the support. We're trying to grow as much as we can. We're almost at 300 subscribers, so do yourself a favor. If you know anybody else that likes the channel, likes hockey prospects, likes talking international hockey, likes to know the future of hockey, place them here. Let them know where they got to be for the live streams and have them a part of this community. We're 288 subscribers, looking to get to 300 here. Hopefully by the end of March would be great. I'm going to be posting some more clips of the stream as well as some other stuff over the next couple months. So I'm really excited to get more into that content. And then obviously things will start ramping up a lot more April to June once the draft situation starts to cultivate, playoff teams find where they are, and the draft order starts getting a little more established across the leagues. So let's go ahead and get started here. First off, I think I'm going to talk first about, obviously everybody knows about the high-end prospects here in the 2026 draft. As far as the draft, we have a lot of different guys to look at for this year's draft. I would say this class is a lot better than the 25 class. I would say the 26 class is about average depth. A little bit more, I think your depth is more so. The top three look really solid right now. I think, you could put any one of Ivar, Stenberg, Verhoff, and McKenna all in that top three consideration conversation. Then you can go anywhere from 4 to 15, and a lot of those guys fill in appropriate spots based on team need and different things like that. So goaltending-wise, seems like a pretty good draft. But the couple of guys I'm going to mention here, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but the 26th draft, I feel like still Gavin McKenna, to me, is still the number one overall pick, in my opinion. Stenberg, though, really close behind him. You can interchange both of them to me. I won't have an argument with them, but I just think McKenna's overall skill, and those that don't know, Gavin McKenna is playing for Penn State this year, over a point per game for Penn State, recently got into some legal troubles. In a situation that was an unfortunate situation for him and his family. Obviously it's good to see that he will not be penalized as harshly as he was initially. And, a really unfortunate situation for a young kid to be faced with having that situation happen. But an all-world talent, really good skill. This is a guy with probably the best playmaking across hockey in terms of guys that aren't in the National Hockey League. Really, really elusive as a skater as well. Very good at escaping and finding ways around players and, finding some real offense. He did struggle initially in the NCAA, but he's really acclimated nicely to the NCAA, and I think he will be a force to be reckoned with by the time he's 2021 in the National Hockey League. Is the expectation for him to be a Celebrini or a McDavid coming into the league? I think that's unfair to McKenna. There's still a lot of physical development there. I'm not even sure that he will necessarily go right into the National Hockey League next year. With the situation with him being in the NCAA, and the development rules that now exist in a post CHL and CAA divide world, there's going to be a real interesting conversation about whether or not he plays in the National Hockey League or he goes back to Penn State next year. I'm inclined to think that he could play in the National Hockey League next year, but it's really going to be determined on the team who drafts him. Obviously Keaton Verhoff's another guy to watch too. We'll go ahead and talk about him. To me, I think he's still the best defenseman in this draft. A lot of people like Albert Smeets as well. Just recently saw him in the Olympics. I personally am a little less bullish on Smeets. I think Smeets has some real risk as well. But I can't help but see a lot of Moritz Seider in watching him, a guy who, Moritz in his draft year was somebody who really struggled, making smart passes out of the zone, held on to pucks a little too long, but the skating was clearly evident. The physical ability was clearly evident. And the overall translatability was pretty evident. But I think Smeets is a better skater than Seider was at that time. I think Smeets will be somebody who is maybe even a little less physical than Mo Seider was and is. But there's a real nice blend there. And I think Smeets is going to be probably closer to 12. But, Keaton Verhoff has a lot of these amazing skill sets as well. And I think Keaton's a guy who will absolutely find himself in the conversation here in the top 3, if not being the second overall pick, depending on how many teams really enjoy the skill set and the rarity that it is to find a guy who's 6'4", very offensively gifted, and playing defense, and being as successful as he has been at the NCAA level. So those two are clearly really gifted and talented players as well, as well as Stenberg as well. I've talked a lot about Stenberg on the channel. You can look at those videos for the rest of them here. But I'm going to go ahead and get to questions here. So Wheezy, what's good? Says Sea Dog fan here. I know you've talked a bit about him before, but I'd love to hear you talk about Alexis Joseph a bit more. Perfect segue here. So to me, Joseph right now, it's hard to compare him to Privalov and DuPont right now. I think those 3 are your predominant 3 for the 27 draft right now. I caught a recent viewing of Alexis Joseph, and I really like the progression he's got in the QMJHL right now. I think he is really, really coming to his own. He feels like he's gotten stronger. He feels like he's a little bit better on board battles. The stick handling and the skill and tight is something that's always been evident in his game, even in the Quebec under 18 level. But he's somebody who I think, next year might be a 100-point scorer in the QMJHL. Having that being in his draft year would be really intriguing and interesting, but really interesting player and somebody who I think hockey fans should be aware of if they're not already. He will be in the consideration, I think, for the under 18 tournament for Canada as well. He should make that roster, barring the Sea Dogs finding their way into the playoffs, which I'm not sure that will be the case, but we'll see. But either way, really gifted player, really talented player. Somebody who I have a ton of time for, and I think he will be a very intriguing guy to watch going forward here. Does he grow even a little bit more? I'm not sure if he's fully maxed out his growth. I mean, right now he's sitting at 6'4" and about 205, 210. But if he got to 6'5", 235, I mean, that's like an Anthony Mantha-sized player with more skill, better skater. That's a freakishly talented player. So that's somebody who I think could be a really intriguing player to watch. And somebody, like I said, a lot of hockey fans should know this name. Obviously, Easy does, being a fan of the Sea Dogs. Clearly somebody to watch going into next year as well. Thanks for that, Easy. And be like Easy. If you got any questions in the chat, feel free to leave them off to the side. If you come in a little bit later and you come in after the live stream goes, feel free to put it in the chat here. I'm totally open, talking about any prospects. So it doesn't matter what year, anything like that, as long as it fits, feel free to shoot it over my way. So I'm going to get into the rest here. So, I talked about Alexis Joseph already. He, to me, I think right now is the current 3 for me in the 27 draft. Number 2 for me right now is Landon DuPont. I originally had him at 1, but, I'll talk a little bit more about the guy who I think is at 1 in a little bit. But with Landon DuPont, he's clearly, I don't think he's taken the step that everybody thought he would this year in the Western Hockey League. He's still a very, very impressive player. Should not face criticism by any means, just like McKenna shouldn't be facing any criticism either. DuPont's an all-world skill guy, all-world skater, incredibly elusive, great power play quarterback. Also really impressive on the penalty kill as well. That's a very underrated trait of his. A little bit smaller. He's only 5'11", 160, 170 pounds. He's still figuring out his frame. I think he's found that he can't dominate the Western Hockey League like he did at Edge, playing at the CSSHL level. He's still a very intriguing player and definitely somebody who should not fall below 2, in my opinion. But there's a lot to like with him too. I think he's the predominant defensive talent right now that is, the best, I think, that's not in college or anything like that. He is clearly somebody who I think should consider going to the NCAA next year. Whether or not he does that, I'm not sure. But he's definitely somebody who I think could handle the rigors of the NCAA and would be really important for him to maybe have that in his draft year. Either way, if he decides to stay in Everett or he decides to go the NCAA route, this is a kid who should have success anywhere he goes. He definitely will be a National Hockey League player. There's not a question there. It's just a matter of, what's the best development situation for Landon DuPont. Personally, I'm of the opinion that the more stable, we've seen it with Gavin McKenna, where he went from being in a very stable environment in Medicine Hat to Penn State, where he's gotten some stability, but clearly, there's some situations that are developing that, might cause some different things and situations that occur in his life that he probably doesn't want. And there's a lot of money being thrown around at him too. He's making $750,000 this year in NIL money. Is that something that's going to deter a guy like Landon DuPont, who just, might be a guy who just wants to focus on hockey, doesn't need the money? He comes from a pro atmosphere where his dad, Mickey DuPont, played in the NHL for a little bit for Calgary. That's going to be an interesting situation to watch. And then obviously the number one guy for me right now for the 27 draft is Nazar Privalov. An absolute all-world freak, man. This kid's got an NHL shot already as a 16-year-old. He's been extremely dominant for Red Army at the NHL level. Somebody who I think could be a really, really interesting player to watch. See, does he come over to the CHL at some point? I don't know. I think it's a possibility though, because obviously we've seen, the likes of, Matvei Michkov dealt with a lot of contract issues. You look at, Kaprizov took a long time to come over to North America. If he's somebody who's dead set and coming over to, the NHL at some point in time, I do think the CHL will be an intriguing option for him. I think he's represented by Gold Star as well, which is Dan Milstein's agency. And Dan Milstein is very, very well known to have a lot of Russian prospects come over to the CHL and make their way into either the OHL, the USHL. You've also made a few now have gone into the QMJHL, and then obviously the Western Hockey League is always an option too. But this is a kid, all-world skill, really physical guy. Hands are incredible. Joseph and him are very similar players, but I think Nazar is able to leverage his body a lot more. I also think he's willing to be a little bit more physical than Joseph is. Now, Joseph is a physical player, don't get me wrong, but Nazar really leans in on that. True power forward game, but also has an incredible amount of skill and can score with the likes of anybody. I wouldn't compare him necessarily to anybody. I think he's his own player, but this is a really, really interesting guy to watch. I think with good development and the opportunity to find himself in a good development situation, he's going to skyrocket even into next year. He could see himself in the U18 conversation should, it ever be decided that Russia is allowed back in. Obviously, they're clearly not right now, and they won't be this year. But, should they ever decide they want to make the decision for them back to be in, he would be somebody who should draw some U18 consideration and probably would be there in that circumstance. So, 26, 27, we got into those guys. We're going to talk now about the 28 draft. And the 28 draft to me has a lot of really intriguing players going into it here. First off, I'll start with a defenseman. He's somebody who would definitely fit into the top 10, I think, in this year. Not in the 26 draft, but in the 28 class. Drew Daly, playing for the Shattuck St. Mary prep team. He is a very interesting player to watch. Somebody who, obviously acclimating to the prep level as a 15-year-old is something that, not a lot of people do. It's very rare, especially as a defenseman. And he's been very successful in that regard. Does he, I think he's past the prep level at this point. I think he will look to go to the OHL. I would expect if he does go to the OHL, he will be probably the number one overall pick, in my opinion. Just really incredible skill, great hands. He's not like a Matty Schaefer. He's more of like a Ryan Ellis type. Somebody who, I think he's got a little bit better boots than Ryan Ellis did as a junior, but, there's a clear offensive skill set. There's a clear ability to defend as well. I think his stick work is excellent for somebody so young. Definitely somebody who I think could really, really draw a lot of attention from OHL scouts and probably already has. And I would expect him to play in the OHL next year. I think he will be a day one OHLer. Should be, I think he'll be number one, but he should really be in that conversation for even top 3 or 5, depending on, who else, could see themselves coming into the OHL as well. But to me, he's the clear defenseman coming out of this 28 class. Him, and there's another guy named Cruz Jim who's playing in the WHL, or it will be next year. Currently playing for the North Alberta Extreme U18 prep level at the CSSHL level. Now we go over, obviously, the number one guy for me is Maddox Schultz. He's a guy who, he actually was going to go for, well, he wasn't personally, but there was a lot of people considering him for exceptional status. His family decided to go the new Western Canadian development model route, which got him some games. In the Western Hockey League, he's done really well. Him and Liam Pugh are kind of a one and the same, very skilled players, but Schultz is a guy who seems like he's a little bit more NHL ready than Pugh is right now. Those two for me are 1-2. I do think there's some others could enter that conversation and get into that ability, but both guys are incredibly skilled. Maddox is a guy who all around is a very good player. He dominates a little differently than guys like McKenna or Crosby or McDavid or any of them, have really done. I look at him, he's kind of his own player. I don't think he's necessarily somebody who, dominates on one specific aspect. He's just a really high IQ hockey player, always finds his routes, willing to engage physically. I think his passing ability is very underrated. I think his shot is also very underrated. Both are really, really elite skills, even already at the Western Hockey League level as a 15-year-old. There's some growth there, obviously, in terms of, what he's able to do with the frame he has already at a very advanced level, where I think Pugh's a little different. Liam Pugh is a guy who is all skill and all shot right now. Still really lean, 6'1" and about $160. He will need to grow into his body and get some strength. That's going to be a key factor for what he does next year. But he's really doing well as well. Both of them have acclimated to the Western Hockey League, probably better than most would have expected. They're going to be a dynamic duo for Regina for years to come. And I think there's a really, really awesome grouping of players here in the 28 class. And those two are clearly two that are a cut above a lot of them. Some other guys that I mentioned out of the 28 class, Frans Karjalahti out of Finland. He's done really well at the U20 level for the U20 Simsarja, which is the top junior league in Finland. He's also gotten himself some time with HIFK as well. I believe he has 1 or 2 pro games already as well. I have yet to really get an enhanced viewing of him. I've had a lot of partial viewings, but nothing that's full yet. But in the games I've watched of him, this is a kid who, he's always been kind of a step above the rest of his class. Clearly somebody who I think is finding that he's able to do more than just be, a passenger at the U20 level as a 16-year-old. He will find himself going in the top 5 of this draft, no question. I think he's somebody who, he's only 6 foot and 170 pounds, but then, he's still 15 years old, or 16 years old. Sorry. This is a really intriguing player, somebody who I think could be a really interesting guy to watch going forward. He will stay in Finland. He'll probably get pro minutes at HIFK. I don't know if it'll be starting next year or the back half of next year, but he'll definitely factor into that lineup eventually. But for now, let him dominate the U20 level. This is a kid who, he doesn't beat you on an incredible amount. I don't think he's got a real elite talent at anything, but he's very above average in all skill sets that he has. Very defensively responsible as well. He, to me, I think is a lot more advanced than the average 16-year-old. He's got a good shot, good offensive ability, gets a lot of really good goals in front of the net, not afraid to get into areas. There's just a lot to like with Frans Karjalahti. And then Sweden has a really good class as well. I'm going to talk about 3 guys in particular. Leon Roos is one guy I'm going to mention. Plays for Brynäs at the U20 level right now. He is an interesting player. He's the second youngest out of this grouping of the 3 I'm going to mention, but With Leon Roos, he's always been a pretty dominant scorer. He's playing at the U18 national level right now, a point per game. In terms of what he's been able to do, he to me seems like the most impressive out of the three. He's somebody who he's really good at carrying the puck. He's not super electrifying, but he's definitely smart with his decisions. Able to really scan well and finds his opportunities pretty easily. Only 15 years old, 2010 born, so he's got some time, but this is a kid who I think should be on a lot of radars. Definitely somebody who I think could find himself really, really finding more opportunity here at the U20 level eventually. I don't think he's good enough to make the U18 roster just yet, but he will be a key factor in the U17 tournament starting next year. I think he and then the other two guys I'm going to mention here will all three factor in for that roster. The next guy I'm going to mention here is Milo Spelkist, playing for Orebro at the U18 level as well. This is a guy who, him and his teammate here, who I'm going to mention, is Lucas Ronizon. Both of them have really been kind of a duo that's always dominated. Both of them came from, different lower end programs, and then eventually found themselves in Orebro. This year, the first year they've ever played together, but they are incredible together. Both of them are over a point per game at the U18 national level. I believe Roynesson's got 25 points in 14 games, Spelkis with 20 and 12. Not normal for the U18 level in terms of guys that come in and, it's one thing to do it in the beginning of the season and do it at the regional level, but it's another thing to be against the best teams across the U18 levels and being a double underager and doing the things they're doing is really, really impressive. Roynesson's a little more explosive. He's definitely somebody who, he finds himself, he's able to, I think one thing he really does well, he's able to combine pace with IQ. And it's one thing to be really fast and really beat everybody, but it's another thing to process the game as fast as you're skating. And that's a very special skill. It's something like a McDavid has. It's something like a Barzal has. This Roynessson kid has that skill. And he's definitely somebody who will find himself on a lot of radars going into next year. I think he's a super, super fun player to watch. He definitely will be a top pick in this 28 draft. I think obviously he's too young this year to go to the CHL. Next year would be the situation there, but I think by, in 18 months, he might be playing for Orebro. Same with Spelkis. Both these guys might be getting some SHL minutes by that time, and deservedly so. The 28 class I think is really solid. I kind of went into more guys than I was expecting to, but, I think I would probably rank them. Roynessson would be second. Roos would be my first, and Spelkis would finish off for that grouping. But there's, a ton of really good players too. Joy Cullen's another one I'd mention. That's a really intriguing player as well. But I'll get more into that in the future. I'm going to mention a couple more guys here that are intriguing guys for future drafts here. Obviously everybody's talking about Madden Deneau right now at the Western Hockey League level. He's the number one pick, I think, in the Western Hockey League draft. Him and Parker McMillan. Both guys that I think should be on a lot of NHL radars in the next few years, but clearly on Western Hockey League scouts' radars. Madden Deneau is somebody who's really dominated at the U15 level, already over 100 points in like 30 games. All-around scorer, really just smart player. Nothing that's so, he's not dominant physically by any means. So I think there's a factor that it's just IQ that's beating a lot of these guys, and he'll grow into his frame. So, if he gets a little bigger, a little more physical, and keeps the IQ that he has, he will be somebody that will threaten in the Western Hockey League pretty quickly. And then Parker McMillan's a huge guy. He's 6'3" and about, I think, 200 pounds, something like that already as a 15-year-old. It's unbelievable stuff to watch. Was super dominant to start the year at the U15 level. Actually found himself moving into the U18 level this year, so he's already kind of got a head start there. I would expect him to make the Western Hockey League next year, probably play and factor into that Western Canadian development model, really leverage that opportunity to get more games. And a lot to like there with those two. Some other guys I want to mention, Juho Nyberg, another kid from Finland. This kid is really, really smart. Just super. I think one of the smartest players of the guys I've mentioned so far. Nothing about his game screams explosive. Nothing about his game screams dominant. He's just super cerebral. Almost he's like a clinician almost. Really, really detailed. Offensively, he's going to lull you to sleep and then throw a pass across. He's got that Kucherov-like ability to kind of, put you in like a sleep paralysis and then make an unbelievable pass. What the hell happened? That's Ewan Eberg. Okay, that's his game is so intriguing in the little bit I've caught of him. I haven't, obviously it's hard to get full games on a lot of these younger kids, but the clips I've seen of him, like those are the things that stand out to me immediately, is just how smart he is as a player. And he will be a guy who will find himself, you can already pencil him in as a top 10 pick in my opinion. He will continue to do what he's done really well. And, he's a 2011 born, so he's got a lot of time, but just a really, really awesome player to watch. And then one other guy I want to mention here for the 29 draft is Lionel Dio. Swiss-born player. This kid is the next best Swiss hockey player. He's dominating and putting up records similar to, what Nick Ehlers did and Nico Hischier did. Already playing at the U21 level as a 15-year-old. Think about it. He's 6 years behind his peers, and he's playing and doing well. It's insane to watch. Massive human being. I mean, I think he's already 6'2" already. 6'2" and 180 pounds. I actually think he's bigger than that. Very early on him, obviously, but a really awesome player to watch. I think he will be the next great talent out of Switzerland. And, he, probably will find himself, if he does really well at the U21 level, I mean, do you consider moving him to North America? I don't know. I mean, he's too young to play in the CHL. He won't be selected in the import draft. He won't actually, I think he's still got another year before he can be selected. So, he might find himself playing at the U21 level and then eventually coming over to the CHL, just like Hischier did. But Daniel is a guy who you have to keep your mind on him and keep a radar on him. He's a really awesome player to watch. And then I'm going to talk about two more guys, two younger guys, two 2012s. This is about as young as I'm going to get because I'm not going to talk about other guys that are younger than this. But Jack Kaiser, who I believe is the next great American talent, and Cale Nickel. Cale Nickel. Cale Nickel has been an elite prospects darling. Over 120 points at the Winnipeg U15 level for AAA. He's clearly dominant, already playing at the Manitoba U18 level, which is not a slow league by any means. It's a very impressive league to be playing in as a 13-year-old, and he's been phenomenal in both leagues. Really high IQ, great skill. He's got impressive hands, like really impressive hands. Far beyond his years in terms of his growth. He should be an exceptional status candidate, in my opinion. They're not going to grant that. I don't think they are. I mean, I would think he should consider it. I think he would get it too. We're considering Cato O'Rourke in the OHL level for for this year's draft. I think Cale Nickel, is somebody who should absolutely get Western Hockey League exceptional status consideration. I think he's that good. And then another guy to watch is Jack Kaiser, playing as an underager for the Shattuck U14 team. He's been lights out as an underager. Very rare to see an underager at the U14 team for Shattuck, but he is incredible to watch. Another guy who I think he's the closest thing I've seen to Connor McDavid since Connor McDavid. Really incredible acceleration. Really smart with his hands. He makes passes out of nothing. Can beat you on the edge, can beat you inside, can stick handle you to death and then lull you to sleep and put a shot up top shelf. Like, just an unbelievable player. So smart. Really competitive too. Just really great drive. Both guys super early. I'm talking about both of these guys right now, but both these guys to me are very much guys that deserve the conversation. I know they're only 14, but they're both all-world skill already and all-world talents already, and they're guys you're going to want to watch. If you come back to the city in 3 or 4 years, I'll say I told you so on those two. But then again, the scouting community will find that out later. But if you listen to the channel here, you'll find out about them now. So, they obviously still got a few years. They're both 2030 eligible, so they got some time. But, if they're going to be in some OHL consideration and some Western Hockey League consideration sooner rather than later. So we should feel the need to talk about them or at least get their names out there. So we got 5 people on here. Again, if you that was kind of it for like the structured part of what I had on here. So if you guys have any questions about prospects, feel free to leave them off to the side, and I will go ahead and talk about those different guys. If you guys want just general hockey questions too, we can go ahead and talk about those. I'm open to that as well. I'm going to keep going as long as there's questions. It's just a matter of if there's no questions, I'll probably jump off. So, feel free to leave them in the chat here on the side. But overall, there's a lot to like about what's going on here and the prospects coming up. I've talked about a couple guys that I think could be exceptional status candidates. Should they be given the opportunity? I've talked about guys like Maddox, Schultz. I've talked about Liam Pugh, the 3 Swedes in the 28 draft. I've talked about, Alexis Joseph and some other guys as well. But if you guys have any other questions on guys that you want to talk about, feel free to leave them on the side and I'll go ahead and talk about them. But I'll give, quick synopsises on those guys and, we'll kind of go from there. So, so feel free to leave them off to the side here. So as far as some other things I'm going to do on the channel, I don't have my next video thought out yet, but I would like to do one here, probably towards March, maybe starting at the beginning of March, I'll do a video. Leave some topics as well. If you guys know of a topic you guys want me to discuss and, do a full live stream on, I don't mind doing that. I would really appreciate it too. It's nice to get sourced out content from others as well. I do have some ideas I'm thinking about doing, like an NHL Fact Friday, doing some small shorts that talk about some different things you don't know about the National Hockey League. Even, doing that with the international side as well. I originally started this channel thinking I would talk a little bit more about international hockey. I haven't really done that as much as I would like. So, obviously, clearly the U18 tournaments are going on right now and will be going on in April. So maybe I'll do a little bit on that. There's some U20 tournaments going on right now at the 3A and 3B level, as well as the U18 tournaments, the 3A, 3B level, but there's, U20 tournaments just finished with all those levels. I can get into a little bit more about that in the future as well, but, it's exciting to see that there's more growth in the channel. I'm hoping to grow this more and get some more content out here. And I really appreciate all the support that everybody gives. It's really cool to be able to see, what people are looking at and, kind of learn more about what is important to people. So, it's great to see that. And, there's no other questions here. So I might jump off here in the next couple minutes. So put your questions in before the end. I'll probably start in a little bit here, but I got into a couple defensemen, some goalies that I think are really intriguing coming into the next few years here. Let me look real quick. I have kind of my list off to the side here. So let me just look and see, some other guys that kind of come to mind for me. I won't get into like the 29 or 30 drafts. I think that's too early for goaltending. The 28 draft, there might be a few. 27 drafts, nobody that's immediately sticking out for me. But I'll get into more of that in a minute. So let me just look through some goaltenders here to see. I don't know if I have anybody immediately in mind. Apologize here. This doesn't make for good streaming, but go ahead and talk anyway. For 27. Oh, yeah. One guy we'll mention for the 2027 draft is Yegor Betsokin, playing at the U18 level for CSK Moscow. He should be an intriguing player as well. I think he's 6'6" and 200 pounds, really big player. I think he will be selected in the CHL import draft. I talked about that in the last stream. But he should be really fun to watch. I'm excited to see, what he's able to do here in the next little bit. And then one other goalie I'll mention here. I'm just kind of looking through some other guys that I think could be really intriguing options as far as goaltenders go. Another guy to watch here is Leif Oten, playing for the Western Hockey League for Lethbridge. He's done really well as the other guy I want to mention is Quinn Bumer, playing. He's already got some USHL minutes for Tri-City. Both guys have really shown well, and I think are guys who will find themselves in the first-round conversation. So 2 guys to watch there as well for goaltenders. Edwards goes on here. What are your thoughts on Albert Smith's Olympic performance, and what's your opinion on the other Latvian draft picks this year? I'm thinking Rudolph Burrows Collins and Oliver Smirnieks. So as far as guys, what I think of Albert Smith, I talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but I'll get more in detail now that it's been asked. I think with Albert's, I saw a lot of the same that I've seen throughout the year. With Albert Smith, I really enjoy watching him skate. He is an incredible skater already. I think he's already NHL quality in terms of his skating. He will not have an issue acclimating that way at all. The thing I look at with Smith is his decision-making isn't always perfect. He's not, I felt like he got rushed a little bit in the Denmark game. There's a couple of really bad passes that led to turnovers and, things that you'll clean up when he's a younger guy. So he's still going to make those moments. And again, he's an 18-year-old kid playing in the Olympics. He's going to make mistakes. I think with Smith, the more I've watched him, the more I see a young Mo Seider. Just a lot of, really good skating frame, really good physical element to his game as well. Clearly he's adapted to the pro level better than anybody would have expected. Rapid development cycle like Mo Seider had. Is the ability there for him to be a Mo Seider? Yeah, I think if he develops correctly, he's got the right mindset, it seems like, when listening to him in interviews. There's NHL projectability there, no question. He definitely will play in the National Hockey League. I just don't know that I see, and I had the same quality about Seider, so maybe I'm wrong. I thought Seider was too high at that time, and clearly I was wrong. I do feel the same way about Smith, but I understand why people are ranking him similarly to how they rated Seider, because nobody knew who Seider was before the draft year started. By the end of it, people had him in the 20s, and then he shot up to 5. Feels like people are correcting that mistake now with Smith. Smith is ranking, anywhere from 8 to 15. Those that are really bullish on him are even throwing him in the top 5 consideration. I think that's bullish, and I think way too early. But I thought he showed well. I did think he showed well. I thought, there was a lot to like. But there is some inherent risk in picking Smith and really understanding who he is as a National Hockey League player. For Burrows Collins, he's had a really good development opportunity in growing his game at the USHL level this year. I think he has done a lot more than I was expecting. And that's great for him. I think he's definitely worked himself into like the 4th or 5th round consideration, in my opinion. It's really cool to see that he's been able to do what he's done at the the USHL level. I think he's a really awesome player to watch. And, it's just fun to be able to see what he's been able to do in his game. He's definitely gotten a lot more physical. He's gotten a lot more intense in terms of what he's been able to bring physically into the USHL. Just a really awesome player to watch, and just, a lot of intrigue for me, in my opinion. I think he definitely has grown a lot. I think he would benefit from playing in the NCAA. He definitely will be a long-range and long-term pick. I think he's going to be probably more of a checking line guy than a, top 6 guy, in my opinion. I think he will definitely fit into a third line somewhere, provide some, his NHL upside to me is maybe 10 or 15 goals a year. But that's not a bad player. That's somebody who's clearly effective if he can bring some defensive elements too, which he has. So I think somebody will select him probably 4th or 5th round, in my opinion. And then Oliver Smirnieks, I've talked about him a lot on the channel. He's a really awesome player to watch too. I love Smirnieks. I think he's super detailed, way advanced for his age. This Edwards, I've talked about him ad nauseum with that route. I like him a lot. I think you would be a fool to take him. If you leave him on the board at 40 which some scouts might do, I think you're making a major mistake. To me, he's a late first. I would be bullish to pick him in like 26, 27. I really like him for the wings. If the Detroit Red Wings can select him, I think he's right in that frame of guy. I think he would be a perfect fit in Detroit. I don't know if there's hot. I think he's middle six upside. I like him better than Burroughs Collins. I think Smeets will obviously be the guy. Then I think it would be Marniques and Burroughs Collins. After that, there might be a few more Latvians selected, but those three, obviously, like you pointed out, are the three that I think will really be in draft consideration. So thanks for that, Edwards. I know that was a long answer, but I know you appreciate it. As you say here, good to see you back. Keep up the good work. I like your analysis. I think you're realistic. Stick to your guns. You're not hyperbolic. All good stuff. Hey, I really appreciate that, man. That's really very nice of you to say. And I'm hoping to post more here in the next few months. I really appreciate that, though. That was very kind. And then Mickey says here, I just joined, so sorry if you talked about this. What are your thoughts about Ryan Rubrick? You're lucky I didn't talk about Ryan Rubrick, but I'll talk about him now. Ryan Rubrick to me is a guy who reminds me a lot of Johan Franzen. Somebody who he's got a lot of offensive ability, but takes shifts off every once in a while. I think he's got a little more opportunity to engage himself more. I think defensively he does have lapses where he doesn't do what he should do. I do think scouts are overcorrecting a little bit with him. He's definitely somebody who's got clear offensive ability, definitely a guy who will impact in the National Hockey League. But there is some real concern about his defensive ability and what he's able to do in the defensive zone. I think with Rubrick, I'm willing to take him, like in my opinion, looking at the rest of the class, I would expect him to be somebody in like 13 to 18. I think is going to be where he fits. I would even be willing to swing at him at like after the top. I don't know if I'd put him in the top 10, but 11 or 12, and you clearly feel a strong way about him. I think he fits in that scheme. But yeah, I mean, I've watched him back with like the London Junior Knights. I've caught a game of him. I've watched a couple games of him in Niagara. I see a lot of the same things though. Just somebody who, clearly offensively gifted. Clearly somebody who he uses his frame pretty well to utilize space offensively. But he's not physical enough, in my opinion. I don't know that his skating is more than just average, which can be worked on to an extent. But he, there's some warts there for sure. But I'm more bullish on him than most are. I would say he's definitely a top 15 pick in this draft. I think it's a mistake to have him lower. And I think there's just there's going to be a lot of coaching and development with Rubrick, and if he takes the advice of a lot of these really professional people, he will find his success in the National Hockey League, and people will laugh at the fact they picked him at 15, if that happens. But, definitely a first round pick. I think closer to, like I said, 13 to 18, I think is right in the sweet spot. Great shot though. Really offensively gifted. Really would like him to engage more, pick up a little bit of at least a full step in his skating, if not a little bit more than that. And he'll find himself in a really good opportunity. But I see a lot of Johan Franzen in Ryan Rubrick. Thank you for that, Mickey. I think it's the first time you've ever actually asked a question on here. I know I know you are a subscriber. There we go. I can talk. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. And then Edward says, do you think McKenna still goes first, or is Stenberg going to topple him? I hear a lot of hysteria that McKenna is a bust, which I strongly disagree with. I agree, Edwards. You don't become Gavin McKenna scoring 150 points in the Western Hockey League without having an elite amount of playmaking and offensive skill set. That to me is pretty obvious, but for whatever reason, people forget how well he played in the Western Hockey League. The NCAA is an adjustment. Not everybody is Macklin Celebrini or Adam Vintilli and putting up a point per game immediately in the NCAA. I think that's I think there's been a lot of unrealistic expectations put on these kids that are 18 going into the NCAA. It is a lot harder than a lot of these top prospects have been making it out to be. I really think that McKenna, too, is still the number one, in my opinion, should probably be the number one going into the draft. Is there a possibility that scouts like Stenberg more? For sure. I personally would go McKenna, then Stenberg. I would even consider Verhoff over Stenberg, actually. And that's not a slight to Stenberg. That's just more so to McKenna and Verhoff. They're both really awesome players with great projectability and have done really well at the NCAA level. So, I have Stenberg at 2 right now because I think he's shown really intriguing elements and has done incredibly well in the Swedish Hockey League. He's definitely somebody who translates really well. Definitely could be an 18-year-old that plays in the, I look at him, if he can become like Leo Carlson at 20, you're going to pick that in the top 2 all day. But to me, McKenna is still, I think a lot of the concerns about McKenna are overblown. I definitely see him as a guy who, McKenna should come into the National Hockey League, just like Bedard is struggling. McKenna might have those struggles coming into the West, in the NHL, but that's okay. That's part of development. It's part of guys becoming better hockey players. It's going to happen. And then Edward says, do you have any favorite goaltenders for this draft? It's always so weird that goalies don't get draft high. Yeah, so sorry, guys. 1 second here. Let me jump on. Running into an issue here with the stream, so I apologize. Let me get on this real quick. I might have to bounce in and out real quick. I'll still be on, so stay on. But I'm running into a small issue here. But I'll answer the question here, Edwards, before things get too hasty here. I would expect that, one guy I really like is Denai Shaikov. I think he's somebody who's really impressive. Plays for Gatineau in the QMJHL. Let me see here. 1 sec. Interesting. All right, sorry, y'all. I had to jump back out real quick, but I'm back on. Let's hear me real quick. All right, can you guys hear me? Let me know in the chat if you guys can. I think you guys can. Can you guys hear me in the chat? Let me know if you can. I'm going to go ahead and get going here, though. So, yeah, do you have any favorite goaltenders for this year's draft? It's always weird when goaltenders don't get drafted high. I'm inclined to think, Denai Shaikov for Gatineau is one guy to watch. Will Keane out of Muskegon is another guy to watch as well. Both guys are really intriguing. I think, another guy, Will Keane's a bigger guy. He's about 6'6" and 200 pounds. Really fun player to watch, really intriguing overall game too. He's really brought about a lot of stability for Muskegon. With Will Keane, he's still really raw. He's really great movement though for somebody who's 6'6". He just found himself coming from Michigan high school hockey into the USHL, which is a massive jump. And he's done really well. I would expect him to be probably in the 3rd round consideration. Same as Shaikov. Shaikov's a little bit smaller, 6'1", and about 190 pounds, but really fluid mover in the crease. I liken him to like a Peter Mrazek. Really not the best positional goaltender, but he's definitely more stable than Mrazek is in his skating. He's somebody who I think could be a really intriguing player to watch going into this year. I think him in a playoff run and leading Gatineau to a lot of success could be a really great opportunity for scouts to get them on their radar. He wasn't drafted last year just because he didn't have a lot of time. He was a backup goaltender for Omsk. Obviously, Gatineau got views on him and saw him as a guy to really watch and look at. So those are both guys that I think could be really awesome options for any team drafting. And I would expect him to be kind of a second or third round pick in my view. And then I want to look at, I think I have a couple more goalies. Arvin Jaswal is another guy who plays for Barrie. He has really found a nice footing in the OHL as well. I like his game a lot too. He, probably will be somebody in the 4th or 5th round that I think should be considered. But those are 3 guys I think you should really watch out for, Edwards. And everybody else in the chat too. I think there's a lot of intrigue with those 3. None of them are really talked about that highly. But they should be more on people's radars. Mickey Moonrock, I'm a Flames fan. Let's imagine you're the GM. You have picks 4 and 28. Who fits best? Great question. At 4, if you can get him, I really like Keaton Verhoff for Calgary. I think he would be loved in Calgary. You guys could use another bigger defenseman with, good framework. You guys lost Rasmus Anderson. I think Verhoff would be a natural fit in terms of that. I think he would be really intriguing to watch and see going forward here. I would expect him to be a little higher than that, but if you can get lucky and get him at 4, that'd be great. 28-wise for Calgary, one guy that I would think would be intriguing would be Chase Harrington for Spokane. I really like Chase Harrington a lot. I think he's a super, super physical player. He's kind of a garbage goal kind of guy, likes to be in front of the net, likes to hammer down rebounds, get a whole bunch of stuff going. He's really kind of good in, really good in the corners, really finds his opportunities very well. When it comes to offense, he's willing to out physical anybody he needs to. He's a very intriguing player in his own right. And there's just a lot to like with Chase Harrington. I think he fits the Flames system really well. So I would say Verhoff and Chase Harrington, if you can get them. Obviously, like the Ruck twins would be interesting too, playing for Medicine Hat. I think 4 would be obviously too early for them. But if you had a couple second-round picks, if you were the Flames, I really think the Ruck twins would be kind of a cool foil. Vancouver had the Sedins. It'd be cool if they had the Ruck twins. That's more kind of a personal thing than, they're probably somebody that will be a late first, early second-round pick. But that's kind of what I'm thinking, Mickey, for those 2 picks. And then thank you, everybody, for letting me know you can hear me. I'm going to do Edward's last question here. And then if anybody else has got any questions in the chat, leave them in the comments below, and I'll talk about them when I can. But I'm going to stop the stream here in a few minutes. But I'm going to answer Edward's question real quick. You think if the Russians were participating, could they beat U.S., Canada, who seem to be poised to have a 4 nations finale repeat, which is a little boring. I think Russia would definitely be in the medal consideration. Their goaltending would be the best in the tournament. You have Shesterkin, you have Vasilevsky, you have Sorokin. I mean, those 3 alone are top 3 of the top 5 goaltenders in the National Hockey League. Defensively, there's some really intriguing players too. I think, Zadorov would wreak havoc at the Olympics. Offensively, they would have a lot of different things too. I think there's a ton of really great options offensively. Obviously, you'd have Kucherov, you'd have Panarin, you'd have Michkov, you'd have, Kaprizov. I mean, you would be loaded offensively too. I'm of the opinion, like I said, I think they would be probably, I would say they're bronze medalists behind, Canada and the U.S. But I think they would be very intriguing nonetheless. They definitely would be in the medal consideration, no question in my eyes. Sorry. I'm going to be just real quick with it. So just any questions you guys have that I haven't answered in this stream, let me know, and I'll put them in the comments and I'll answer them later. I just don't want to go too long here because I know people like shorter videos. So I'm going to keep it to an hour. But if you guys have any more questions, feel free to leave them on the side. Mickey says, thank you for your insight. I really appreciate it, man. And then obviously it sucks that the Russians aren't playing. It just isn't the same. It's really not. It's really not. It's a bummer that they're not able to be a part of the tournament. But obviously there's understandable reasons. clearly the war is a major issue, and it's, you hit them where it hurts, and they love hockey. So there's clearly some, that's really kind of the main motivation for why they're not in the tournament, in my opinion. But, hopefully things get sorted out, and sooner rather than later, they're able to be a part of international competition. So yeah, if you've left any comments, feel free to leave them, later in the video, and I will answer them when I can. Really appreciate everybody being on here. Keep pushing the gospel, keep letting people know. I'm going to hopefully do a stream here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll talk more about some, different prospect things. Maybe I'll do more of a Q&A thing so I can get more questions out here. So I'll keep you guys posted when I do that. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for being on here. Really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a good night, and we'll talk soon. Bye.